Hello everyone. I asked a question on the Ask a Banbury Vet Facebook group yesterday, which was an attempt by me to kind of bridge the gap between or understand what happens when I say something and you guys hear it. So essentially, as medical professionals, we're sometimes guilty of lapsing into a bit of professionalese or not actually explaining entirely what we mean by something. So the question was really ambiguously worded, and that was intentional because that's what happens in consultation, in the heat of consultations sometimes. And I thought today for this week's video, we'd take a look into basically an understanding of chances and statistics. Sounds boring, but I'll try and make it interesting.
So here it is. Here's the question. Quick and morbid. Sorry, I'm sorry about that. Poll for this video. If I told you, or another vet told you, your pet had a serious disease with an average survival time of 6 months, what would you think about when your pet might die? So essentially I tried to make it a short, ambiguous statement and just get sort of an emotional reaction, I suppose, to it. So we can see I put up four answers to the poll. In around 3 to 6 months time, in around 6 months time, better than 50-50 chance of making it to a year or more, or very soon. So remember, the vet has said an average survival time of 6 months. So what have we got here? So people who thought very soon, very few of those, only 3 of those. I think we've got about 180 comments, so probably 1.5%, something like that. About 4% of people thought a better than 50-50 chance of making it to a year or more. In around 6 months' time, it comes in at 25% of people. Vast majority of people think around sort of the 3 to 6 months' time. So I would say of everybody in this group, their understanding of average survival time of 6 months is either around 6 months or slightly less than 6 months, in around 3 to 6 months time. So perhaps a little bit pessimistic in actual fact. There are 2 comments that I want to, two points that I want to bring out of this, and something that you should always ask vets or ask doctors when they say an average survival time. The first one is this word, average. What does average actually mean? Average is a very indistinct term. We think of it as the most common, I suppose. But if you think back to your O-level or GCSE maths, we've got 3 types of average. We've got mode, mean, and median. And we tend to talk about medians. I'll come on to that in a little bit. Mode is the most common time. The median is the medial, the animal or patient that's right in the middle of the sample size, and the mean is where you add everything up and divide it by the number. But we tend to talk about medians when we talk about biological statistics. And so the second point is survival time. What do we mean by survival time? So let me first of all just bring you onto the stats about averages. So what do we mean by these averages? We've got mode, median, and mean, as we talked about, and there's 3 different types of averages. So average in itself is not a really good word. So in this case, what I've done is we've gone back and we've got a pretend study here, and we're going to look at animals, how long they survived after the diagnosis. So in this case, we've got 1, 2, 3 animals who survived for 1 month. 1 animal died at 3 months post-diagnosis, another one at 5 months, another one at 6, and so on. 1 at 8 months, 1 at 9 months, 1 survived 15 months after diagnosis, and 1 survived for 24 months after diagnosis. So on that basis, we can add up all of them, and there's 10 animals there, and we get a total of 49. So we can say our mean survival time is 4.9 months. We then can look at our mode survival time. That's the survival time for, what's the most common survival time? The most common survival time in that case is there, 1 month. So our mode survival time is 1 month.
And then finally, the one that we always talk about is the median survival time, and that's the one that's right in the middle, and that's that one there. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 afterwards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 behind it. So it's only one of those two, but about 6 months. So we can say median survival time of 6 months. So we're getting different answers, and it all depends on what this spread of survivability is here. So as someone very astutely pointed out in the comments, they would ask about the stats behind all this. So when we say an average survival time of 6 months, what about all the other people around it? What about all the other animals that are going on here? Because that will very much influence what's going on with this median number here. Essentially, what they're asking for is something called a distribution. So let's draw a quick graph here. So what we've got here, along here. So along here we've got time, and let's say we've got 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, yada yada yada, and then up here is number of animals that die in that month. So in this case, what we tend to find, about 3 die in the first month, so it goes like this, and then it kind of tails off and it goes along like that. So that was our study there. So in our study, generally what you tend to find, that particular study, so if we put 6 months here, which is that average survival time we were talking about, we'll put it down here, it tends to be that a lot of the animals tend to die in this first couple of months or so, and that fits in with, I suppose, what we see on our questions. A lot of people think that animals die around this sort of time because animals do tend to kind of, as soon as you made a diagnosis, there's that initial tailing off of the really sick ones, and then you've got the ones that are slightly better who keep going on. Of course, the graph could be shaped more like this. So it's sort of at 6 months when the majority of them die. Or finally, we might have a graph which is more like there's a really high initial death rate, and then it goes like this. It tails off, but there's a long tail, and it just goes on and on and on and on. So if we look at all these different types of all these different animals, in this case, you know that if your animals made it to 3 months, or in this case, in actual fact, they are now part of this cohort that lasts for a long time. So the chances change as time goes by. In this case, yeah, 6 months, but when it's front loaded, or you can even get rear loaded as well, it all very much depends on which cohort of animals they're in. So when we talk about average survival time, you need, and you clarify that you're talking about median survival time, remember we're dealing with a whole gamut of animals, the ones that die early, the ones that die late. Now, the ones that die early, it may be those are the ones that are very, very sick, maybe they're very young, they're a particular breed, those sort of things. You need to be asking the question, is my animal part of one of those animals that's going to die early? Or are they going to be up here in the survivors category? And then as time goes by, and they've survived 1 month, they've survived 2 months, they've survived 3 months, they're now into the survivors category. So the survivors are down here. And once you got into this sort of area, this line no longer applies because you've survived. So it sounds silly, but the longer you survive, the longer you're predicted then to survive. So just because at this point here, the vet or the doctor has said 6 months, and you get to 6 months, it's not the case that they're going to die at this point here at 6 months. That's not the case at all. If they get to 6 months, I wouldn't then be looking at the calendar wondering about when they're going to go. At 6 months, they're now in this cohort here. So their survival time needs to be re-evaluated. It might be they get another 6 months at this point. So the predictions keep changing as time goes along. The next question is then to look at this word survival when we talk about average survival time, especially in veterinary medicine, because survival can either mean natural end of life or it can mean euthanasia, i.e. somebody has decided that enough's enough and the animal needs to put to sleep, unfortunately. And that brings us on to the final point, which is quality of life. And we all discussed about quality of life, and certainly in the human field now there's this idea of QALYs. So how many quality life years does a particular treatment bring? So if we're talking about a median survival time of 6 months, now that may be a median survival time which is good quality survival time, or it may be a median survival time where an animal is just about getting through the days. And of course, everybody's idea of what is a good quality of life is different, and it varies from animal to animal as well. So for instance, a young active animal is less likely to have a quality of life if it can't run around, if it can't interact with toys, can't eat, those sort of things, whereas an older animal, perhaps we're a little bit more accepting of them having a slightly slower pace of life. For ourselves as well, we look at our animals, we understand our animals, our pets in terms of what we've had before, what we like to do with them, and we may well feel that a particular pet hasn't got a quality of life if it can't go out walking every day, for instance, if you're a keen hill walker, whereas somebody perhaps who's retired and doesn't get out much, and they like the dog to sit next to them on the sofa watching the television, well, that's not so important to them. So it's really, really important that when we talk about survival time, we look at the quality of that survival time, i.e., is that going to be acceptable for us? Is it going to be acceptable for a much loved pet as well on the side? So, people talk about chemotherapy, for instance. Some people will accept the loss of hair in chemotherapy, or the minor loss of hair. Some people, the loss of energy, the loss of hair is unacceptable. So again, when we talk about average median survival times, it's important to ask the question, what's my pet going to be like during this time? Hope you enjoyed this. It's a big topic, and we've spent 10 minutes or so chatting about it, so we've really only just about scratched the surface. My big takeaways from this though are that it's really, really important not to focus on that 6 months. So average survival time 6 months. Ask questions, dig. What does that 6 months actually mean? What happens if my animal survives 6 months? What happens if my much loved pet survives 12 months? Is it then a much longer survival time? What are they going to be like during this period? Any questions? Pop them in the comments below. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye.